those purple ornaments. My guess is it's somewhere. I have no idea where the ornaments are, but just at least think about them. Alright, as we move on. And then you can think about the walnuts in the ground for remembering that the Clostridium perfringens is spore forming, just like all other Clostridium bacteria out there. So walnuts in the ground. The gas mask is to help you to remember that the bacteria thrives in anaerobic conditions. Okay, so in addition to these characteristics, the Clostridium perfringens will create a double zone of hemolysis of blood agar. So you can remember this by thinking about the double fine zone sign. Right over here is the double fine zone sign. Double fine zone sign, okay. And that's supposed to help you remember the double zone of hemolysis on blood agar. And then it is going to be identified by the Nagler reaction. And this involves creating the egg yolk agar plate. And then one side of the plate will contain the antitoxin alpha toxin. And then the lecithinase activity will be detected on the side with no antitoxin. Or, at the very least, if we see lecithinase activity on the side with no antitoxin, then we can be confident that we have the Clostridium perfringens bacteria. So, moving on to the reservoir, the bacteria can be found in the soil and human colon. So think about the pots of soil knocked over here. And then the transmission is through foodborne and traumatic implantation. In fact, the infection is associated with the open wounds and dirt getting in. So that is why it is often associated with the military and motorcycle accidents. You can remember this by thinking of the scene of a military guy falling off of his motorcycle, as shown over here. And then for pathogenesis, it starts with the spores germinating under anaerobic conditions inside a tissue, and then the vegetative cells will produce the alpha toxin, and this will be a phospholipase C, and this alpha toxin is a lecithinase. And you can remember this by thinking about the flag with the alpha symbol hanging from the clothesline, as shown over here. And this alpha toxin, which is a lecithinase, will disrupt the phospholipid bilayer membrane. And you can remember this by thinking about the clothespin that are arranged to represent the phospholipid bilayer, kind of shown over here. And this alpha toxin flag does a nice job at representing this damage, resulting in these lipids falling apart and ultimately leading to destruction of the bilayer. So what happens next is, with this destruction of the phospholipid bilayer, the red blood cells are damaged. In addition to the platelets, the white blood cells, and the endothelial cells. This leads to massive hemolysis, tissue destruction, and hepatic toxicity. And you can remember these by thinking about the smashed tomatoes on the ground from the accident. So here are the smashed tomatoes on the ground. And then, in addition, if it is an enterotoxin produced by this bacteria, that toxin will be produced in the intestines during food poisoning, and then this enterotoxin will disrupt the ion transport, leading to watery diarrhea along with cramps. So just remember that Clostridium perfringens can also lead to watery diarrhea, especially if the route of transmission is foodborne. Now for diseases, the most problematic one is called the gas gangrene or myonecrosis. This is due to the contamination of the wound with soil or feces. This causes acute and increasing pain at the wound site, along with tense tissue and exudate. The tense tissue can be represented or evidenced by the presence of edema or gas. And then the systemic symptoms that could also result include fever and tachycardia, diaphoresis, pallor, and then what's problematic about the gas gangrene is that it occurs rapidly and there is high mortality if untreated. So you can remember this by thinking about the gas that is coming from the motorcycle, as shown over here. It's kind of hard to see, but you get the point. And then for food poisoning, it often comes from reheated meat dishes, and this causes organism to grow to high numbers. Now, the onset is pretty slow, with the 8 to 24-hour incubation period. So think about the motorcyclist knocking over the slow sign, as shown over here. And that helps you to remember that the incubation period is pretty slow, or at least the onset of the food poisoning is slow. Regarding the Clostridium perfringens, and then the enterotoxin that is produced in the gut will produce the self-limiting, non-inflammatory, watery diarrhea. And you can remember this by thinking about the motorcyclist sitting in a muddy water. That's gross, that looks like a diarrhea. Anyways, let's move on to how to diagnose this bacteria. So, the diagnosis will mainly be clinical, because these diseases can lead to unique clinical characteristics. And then for treatment, if you're trying to treat the gas gangrene, it is important to conduct a debridement of the wound, and then also make sure you delay the closure of the wound for prolonged exposure to oxygen. And then also utilize clindamycin and IV penicillin G, along with hyperbaric chamber if needed. And you can remember the penicillin G medication